The year 2024 will be etched in the annals of history as one of the darkest chapters in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. On October 7, 2023, a large-scale attack by Hamas on Israeli soil shocked the world. The attack, resulting in the deaths of 1,139 Israelis, marked a turning point. It unleashed a wave of violence and retribution that would engulf the region for months to come. The ensuing Israeli military operation in Gaza, launched in response to the Hamas attack, quickly spiraled into a full-blown conflict. The densely populated enclave, home to over 2 million Palestinians, became the epicenter of a humanitarian catastrophe. As bombs rained down, the fragile infrastructure crumbled, and the streets became littered with rubble and despair. The world watched in horror as the death toll mounted, a grim testament to the human cost of this protracted conflict. The echoes of past wars, from the Nakba of 1948 to the wars of 1967 and 2014, resonated through the collective memory of the Palestinian people. As the world grapples with the aftermath of this latest chapter, the question remains, how many more generations will inherit this legacy of conflict before peace prevails? The Gaza Strip, once a vibrant hub of Palestinian life, has been transformed into a wasteland. The 2024 conflict inflicted unimaginable suffering on its civilian population, leaving a trail of death, displacement, and despair. Hospitals, schools, and homes, once symbols of hope and resilience, were reduced to rubble. The United Nations estimates that over 23,842 Palestinians were killed in 2024 alone. The International Rescue Committee reported that a further 51,925 individuals were wounded, many suffering injuries that will require lifelong care. The conflict has displaced over 90% of Gaza's population, leaving them internally displaced and reliant on humanitarian aid. Hospitals, overwhelmed with casualties, faced severe shortages of medical supplies, equipment, and qualified personnel. The IRC reported that 34 hospitals and 80 health centers were rendered non-functional, further exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Thousands of children have been orphaned or separated from their families, left to navigate the trauma of war and displacement alone. The 2024 conflict was marked by a brutal efficiency in Israeli military tactics, raising serious concerns about the disproportionate use of force and potential war crimes. Israel's military doctrine, often described as the Dahiya doctrine, emphasizes the use of overwhelming firepower to target not only military objectives, but also civilian infrastructure. One of the most controversial tactics employed by Israel was the siege of Gaza. The complete blockade of goods and people into and out of the Strip, coupled with relentless airstrikes and artillery bombardment, created a suffocating pressure cooker of human suffering. The siege effectively turned Gaza into an open-air prison, denying its residents access to essential supplies, medical care, and opportunities for economic activity. Another deeply troubling aspect of the conflict was the targeting of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and UN shelters. The deliberate targeting of medical facilities, clearly marked and protected under international humanitarian law, constitutes a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions. While the Gaza Strip bore the brunt of the 2024 conflict, its repercussions reverberated far beyond its borders. The occupied West Bank, historically a tinderbox of tensions, witnessed a surge in violence and unrest. Israeli settlers, emboldened by the government's hardline stance, intensified their attacks on Palestinian communities. These attacks, ranging from vandalism and arson to physical assault and even murder, further fueled the cycle of violence and deepened the climate of fear and mistrust. The conflict also spilled over into Lebanon, where Israel engaged in a 2-month-long military campaign against Hezbollah. The interconnectedness of these conflicts underscores the need for a comprehensive and inclusive approach to peacebuilding in the Middle East. Addressing the root causes of the conflict, including the occupation, the blockade, and the denial of Palestinian rights, is essential to achieving a just and sustainable peace. The 2024 conflict laid bare the international community's impotence and paralysis in the face of Israeli aggression. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, continued its unwavering support, providing over $20 billion in military aid and blocking any meaningful diplomatic efforts to censure Israel's actions. The UN Security Council, often hampered by vetoes from permanent members, proved incapable of taking decisive action. While the UN General Assembly called for a ceasefire in December 2024, Israeli airstrikes continued unabated. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in November 2024. These warrants, accusing the individuals of war crimes and crimes against humanity, were met with defiance by Israel. The international community's failure to hold Israel accountable for its actions has created a dangerous precedent, emboldening other actors to act with impunity. Amidst the grim statistics and geopolitical maneuvering, it is essential to remember the human faces of this conflict. The stories of ordinary Palestinians caught in the crossfire offer a poignant glimpse into the devastating impact of the violence. Iman Shagnoubi, a young mother from Gaza City, shared her harrowing experience of fleeing her home under a barrage of bombs, her voice trembling as she described the terror that gripped her children. Another survivor, Shireen Abu Nida, a doctor at Al-Shifa Hospital, recounted the horrors she witnessed as the hospital, overwhelmed with casualties, struggled to cope with the influx of wounded. Musa Ali Muhammad al-Maghribi, a farmer from Beit Hanun in northern Gaza, returned to his land after the ceasefire to find his crops destroyed, his livelihood in ruins. These personal accounts, fragments of lives shattered by conflict, serve as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war. It is these voices, often silenced or ignored, that must be amplified if we are to build a future where peace and justice prevail. The 2024 conflict, while shocking in its brutality, was not an anomaly but rather a continuation of a century-long struggle. To understand the roots of this conflict, one must delve into the historical context, tracing the narrative of dispossession, displacement, and broken promises that have defined the Palestinian experience. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, a British document that promised a Jewish homeland in Palestine, sowed the seeds of conflict by disregarding the rights and aspirations of the Palestinian people. The 1948 war, which resulted in the creation of Israel, and the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, remains a deeply traumatic event in Palestinian collective memory, referred to as the Nakba, or catastrophe. The subsequent decades witnessed further territorial losses and displacement during the 1967 Six-Day War, the First Intifada, the Second Intifada, and the series of Gaza wars. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, offered a glimmer of hope for a negotiated two-state solution. However, the continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, the ongoing blockade of Gaza, and the failure to address core issues such as Jerusalem and the right of return for Palestinian refugees have rendered the two-state solution increasingly elusive. As the dust settles on the rubble of the 2024 conflict, the international community faces a critical juncture. The status quo, marked by occupation, siege, and systemic discrimination, is unsustainable and will inevitably lead to further cycles of violence. What is needed now is concrete action to address the root causes of the conflict and to hold all parties accountable for their actions. The international community must move beyond its traditional role as a passive observer and become an active agent for change. This requires a multi-pronged approach that includes, first, ensuring unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza and providing urgent assistance to those in need. The blockade must be lifted immediately, and the reconstruction of Gaza's devastated infrastructure must be prioritized. Second, reviving the moribund peace process and working towards a just and sustainable two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. This will require addressing core issues such as Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, and security arrangements in a manner that respects the rights and aspirations of both Palestinians and Israelis. Third, holding all parties accountable for violations of international law. The path to peace in the Holy Land will be long and arduous, requiring courage, compromise, and a shared vision for the future. The two-state solution, while imperfect, remains the only viable option for achieving a just and lasting peace. This requires a fundamental shift in mindset, a recognition that the security and well-being of both Palestinians and Israelis are inextricably linked. The future of the region depends on the ability of both sides to break free from the shackles of the past and embrace a future based on mutual respect, coexistence, and recognition. This will require leadership on both sides willing to take bold steps and make difficult choices. It also demands the unwavering support of the international community, acting as an honest broker and guarantor of peace. Another generation cannot be condemned to inherit the legacy of conflict, violence, and despair. The international community has a moral obligation to act, not as a bystander, but as an architect of a just and lasting peace.